everyone, and welcome to Monday the 22nd of June's Elite Encounters video update. I apologise if there's some problems with the sound today or anything else, because I have just had a mad rush trying to get this thing working, because for some reason booted up at 1:45 and by 10:02 realised the sound wasn't working, so I just had a big rush to try and get that working. So any problems with it, I'll obviously find out when I put it onto the YouTube thing, and I will obviously then try and intend to do something a bit different for that and re-record it or something if it's bad, but don't worry. Okay, so today what we're going to go into, well, progress this week has been all on the one aspect, I'm afraid. It's been a bit of a hellish week actually this week, with one thing and another. So focus on the game has been spotty at best this week, but we still have made some progress on the space combat and in miniature rules, that kind of thing. I haven't had much time over the last couple of days to put together a particularly fancy presentation for this, so you'll just have to make do with what's there. So tough. I'm sure you'd all rather I spent time working on the game anyway. So we're going to go into the space combat thing with a little more depth than went into it last week, because it is evolving still at the moment. As it's written, things change and things improve, hopefully. I'm hoping you'll see it the same way that I do. And I've been trying to break down essentially what the space combat and the miniature rules actually are, to make it a bit more granular and easier to read, understand, and hopefully play. So this update is probably going to focus mostly on that, because not a lot else has been done, because all the interesting stuff about the system and the background and so on is all pretty much done. I'm still pretty sure that it's done, so we'll carry on from there. So the main question that I ask, and I touched on this in the last update, is why is this bit so bleeping hard? This is the bit that has been causing me the most headaches. It is the core of the game, really, so I think there's quite a bit of pressure to make sure that it is representative of Elite Dangerous and the Elite Universe in general, and the sort of focus on space that this game is going to have means that the vehicle side of it, which includes the space combat, space rules and all that sort of stuff, needs to work. It needs to be linked in well with the personal combat rules, and it needs to work well with the equipment that's in the Elite Dangerous game, but also expand that technology base that's used for the spacecraft and use it for other vehicles as well. So we're also not so much having to scale what's there, but having to downscale what's on the screen as well, what's on the game universe as well. It is the most complex part of the game, because unlike the personal rules where people are just people, you have your mental, well, as far as this game is concerned, you have your physical, mental and sensory aspect. You have body mods, you have medical, you have combat, you have damage, you have healing, all that sort of stuff. Fairly complicated in itself, but the complexity of this part of the game arises because Elite Dangerous and the previous games in the Elite franchise all have their own kind of level of stuff that's there, if you like. So all that technology that's been mentioned, hyperdrives, docking bays, space stations, spacecraft, all that sort of stuff, all has to be represented in here somewhere. The equipment that goes into your spacecraft obviously is very changeable, and there's various different versions of it as well, so you've got various different class levels of it. So there's a lot to tie together, a lot to try and tie up into one generic rule set that isn't going to be mind-blowingly complex to do. 90% of that focus, sorry, not really that, 90% of that correlation work has been done. I don't think it's ever going to be to a point where I'm completely happy with it, and that brings me to the sort of thing that I'm going to deal with a bit later on, is I have to be careful of rewrite hell, where I start to rewrite stuff, I'm still not happy with it. It works, but I'm still not happy with it. It works, but I'm still not happy with it. And stop at a point and say, okay, it works well enough, it can go. And if I'm happy with that, I'll then pass it on to the very generous volunteers who have decided they're going to help me playtest and proofread this stuff, and see if they're happy with it. If they're happy with it, then I'll leave it. They're going to be in a better position then to say to me, right Dave, sort that out, sort this out, that's not quite right. And I'm hoping they'll do that. That's what this game needs. I don't want yes men as far as playtesters and community support is concerned. I want people who are going to actually criticise and be honest and constructive with that criticism, I will add. because that's the only way this game's going to get finished. That's the only way it's going to work, and it's going to be right, and everyone out there is going to, or hopefully most people out there are going to think, yes, that's fine, that's a good representation of what Elite Dangerous is, and Elite and Frontier are all about. So at this stage in the book, this is where I have got to on 2 previous occasions when I've been doing rewrites to the rules. So there are actually 3 +++ tags, which is what I use to tag where I currently am in a rewrite or in a development process. So it's +++, then a space, and then whatever I want to mark as the header. Then I make that a first level header, so it shows up in the content list of my Word document. Now I know where I've been to, so I'm actually at the point where I now have 3 +++ tags at the same point. So everything that comes after that is going to be a serious rewrite. That's the bit where it's going to have the most focus put on bringing it into line with what's now the main set of rules. So that's at the moment representative of quite a historical part of the development. It shouldn't be a big job to do that, because there is a focus on what's been done now and what the direction for this part of the game is. So hopefully that shouldn't be a big job. It should just be a matter of taking the bits that are there, either binning them or rewriting them so that they fit better with what's happening now. The main part of that is that the personal stats, the character stats, avatar stats that are used in the ship and vehicle combat stuff need to be changed, because at the moment it still refers to the old 9 stat system, whereas it now is a 3 stat system. So rather than being, God, I can't remember what it was, I don't care, whatever it was, it's now going to be mind plus senses plus whatever trait and experience you may have. So yeah, so at the moment it's a bit of a mess, but it is getting there. But the rewritten bits are working well. So all the bits that are going on, I've currently rewritten the, what would I call it? The flipping it. My mind's gone a complete blank. It's been a hell of a day today. I apologise. I'm a bit scatty today. Yeah, the rewritten bits are working well. I'm just going to leave it at that. I've lost the track of what I was going to say. So the space combat will have 4 levels of complexity when it comes to the play. I've touched on that bit before. So you'll have the bit where you can roleplay the roles. You've got the bit where you can simply represent it on a board game as such. I don't want to call it a board game. It's not a board game. It's a set of miniatures rules. It's intended to work within the game as a visualization aid. But the more I look at this, people will probably play this as a standalone game at some point, and I am trying to make sure that it's flexible enough that if people want to do that, then with hopefully just a few bits of mucking about, they can do that. So you've got the simple rules for miniatures combat, and then you've got the intermediate and advanced rules, which will introduce gradually more bits and pieces into it, which we're going to go into in this. So this update is more intended to expand for you guys what's going to be the core of the vehicle combat system. Right, so the initial level is role-playing the scenario. This is the bit where you'll need the least amount of stats. Primarily all you'll need is your basic ship configuration and your own avatar's stats and values for things that control combat. So that would be the piloting skill and the gunnery skills and that kind of thing. Obviously through the narrative play you can expand a lot on the combat scenario. One thing that the miniatures rules don't encompass is the engineering aspect of things, or the repair of things, or what extended crew can do. So you've got the pilot, you've got the gunner, but there's nothing really that your engineer or your hyperdrive specialist or your repair guy or your vending machine repairman fuzzer can do. But the narrative part of it, the narrative roleplay of the scenario, is where that can happen. So without singularly focusing on the ship and the other ship and the weapons that fire between those ships and the defensive systems, you can go to the narrative part of it. How are the players reacting to this sort of thing? How are the avatars on board that ship or their ships reacting to this situation? If one of the characters or NPCs is an engineer or a repair guy or a technician, will he be able to add something to that combat scenario by going and fixing something that's been blown up or that's been damaged? Can he shore up the shields in some way? That kind of thing. And that's things that there's not a particular set of rules to cover, because that's things that will be handled in each role-playing session as part of the narrative. So I'm not going into that level of granularity with it. Granularity. Let's try and speak English, David. So yeah, the role-playing scenario is try and stay away from the stats. You get the basic things you need, like the hull points, the manoeuvrability, the movement value, which will help you set up your scenario, and the GM can use to track how that combat is going. So if a shot lands, he, as the GM, or she, let's be fair, can then use those stats to track how long that combat's going to last, or not. That's what fudging's all about. Again, it doesn't use any counters or anything. That's not intended to be a visual representation. It's supposed to be represented in the narrative, so the GM and the players will themselves visualise in their own heads how that works. That's the plan for that one anyway. Okay, the only downside of that is it can take a while, and I've been in sessions where the role playing of a scenario has taken hours to run through. It can be quite long, but I think it's the most fun. I mean, I know I'm pushing the fact that I want this to have some kind of miniatures rules system in it, but I always find that role playing a combat scenario, as long as it's not every session, but role playing through a combat scenario can be a lot of fun, and it can be very entertaining and very informative as well, because it lets your character develop as a combateer. It will let you increase your reputation as a combateer as well, especially if you're into the elite rating. So yeah, so much fun. Simple rules. Again, I've used the same picture as last week to highlight what the simple rules can represent, which is hopefully a very simple and quick way to represent combat in the game that can be used for something as simple as some kind of card-based system to record the ship stats. So rather than using a full-size character sheet or ship record sheet or ship record file as we finalised last week, all you need is a card. And will I supply that with the game? I don't know. Will it have it as part of the game? I don't know yet. I do know one thing: it won't be supplied as separate cards, even though those cards on the screen, actually, the more I look at them, look really nice. So it is kind of tempting me to do that kind of thing. But I am intending on putting that kind of information in the book to see that you can run it as quickly as you possibly can. If you've got a quick reference card, then so much the better. So again, minimal stats will be used in this section. On the card image there, you see most of what's actually used. If you look at the bottom, you've got MOV and CF, and I was going to use CF as the manoeuvrability rating, the curve factor from the original game, but I've decided to go with the standardised man manoeuvrability because I feel that goes better with the feel of this game. Yeah, so your shields, your hull points, your shots per turn represents how many weapons you've got on a particular facing and how much damage they will do. So kinetic and energy weapons are both represented there. You can have as many as you like on each facing. So your damage will be calculated by that. The damage to your ship's shields and hull will be recorded on the shields and hull tracker, and that can either be on this card or on the character sheet, as we mentioned before. So minimal stats used again. Visual elements can be used at this stage. This is obviously the introduction of the miniature rules type thing. So the counters that will be supplied will be there, miniatures will be there, and this will be the bit in the book where those elements will be described and explained how they can be used. As I've noted in the book, I'm halfway through writing this part of the book now, is the simple rule side of it, because it's quite a long part of the book to write. It will outline what the counters are, how they're represented. It's also involving a little bit of design work on the counters to see what it's going to look like. And it has actually highlighted at this point that the counter size I was going to go for, which was your standard 25mm style base, which is about an inch in diameter, or an inch on its pointy ends, it's not big enough to do what I want it to do, and I don't want to be cramming all this information onto a tiny little counter. I want it to be expandable enough that you can have a counter that's got a ship on it, as well as a little bit of information to let you track what's happening with that ship, or which ship it is, or anything like that. You know, just something so you can use it as something interesting and useful, rather than being a tiny little thing that's just got so much information you've got to have it right close to your face before you can read it. So, still working on that design and what we can possibly have on there. I apologise for the little hand that's floating around. That's me moving the mouse by mistake when I should be using the arrow key to page through this file. So yes, this will introduce how those work, what they look like, how movement is done, what you need to use to represent your movement. As I've said before, it will use a MOV and man values will be, well, MOV value more than anything else, is an arbitrary value that represents a unit of movement. So if you're using a hex grid, then it will be 1 hex, or 1 hex equals 1 MOV point. Otherwise you can use a ruler and use in inches, you can use centimetres, you can use whatever you like, which is what I mean about the size of these bases. It's quite restrictive in a sense that if I want to use hexes then I need to make sure that I use a size that's compatible with a hex board that you can buy in the shops or whatever like that. Either that or supply you with printable A4 sheets of hexes that you can lay together and make a layout from. Or alternatively use what is probably the simpler option, which is just use a ruler and measure from the middle of your counter to however far away you want to move, and that's your distance done. So, is it as I said before, is it simple enough to use cards to hold all the required stats? If it can be done that way and it's tidy to look at, which that layout of card on there does actually look quite appealing, does hold all that you need. The only thing missing is the task pools, the offensive and defensive task pools. So I may put them on there, I may not. We'll see how I decide to go ahead with that card representation thing. We'll see. If it's going to be a reasonable amount of work, but not too much and not going to take away from the core product, then it will be done. No complex charging power or heat management concepts in this level, because that would introduce far too much complexity into the way that the between things run. What I intend to try and make at this stage, as you can see in the bottom line there, is a pick up and play concept. Essentially make sure that you can pick up this game. If you want to have a quick combat game, if you want in a lunch break or something, you can play a combat game in a lunch break. That's the sort of level I'm trying to go for, so that within your game as well, using some of the tenets of like trading card games, that's that kind of thing, your quick fix game. So if you want to have a combat session or an RPG that's quick, then you've got these options to do it, and that's hopefully the way it will go. As I say, I'm about halfway through writing this stage of it, but again, I'm getting kind of mired in details at the moment. It's one of those things where I can get a lot written, and then I hit a start thing and need to try and work out what's going to get done from there. So that's the bit where it's all needing to get sorted through. So the intermediate rules are conceptual at the moment. All the capacity for those has been built into the the vehicle record files. So they are looking quite set as to what's going to be part of the intermediate section, which is all said here. So add more elements to the stat shoes. So more stats will be put in. For example, your power management, possibly. I'm not entirely sure. I think it'll be modifiers to the class and rating, so on. So upgradable items can be bought, which would mean that you can change the class and rating of items that are fitted to your ship. If you have items fitted that are better or worse than the default, then you will accordingly get bonuses or penalties to your in-use values in your stats. So for example, if you downgrade the thrusters, which affects your MOV, and affects your manoeuvrability, and your MOV actually, I think. I can't remember now. That's shocking. If you buy something that changes those values, like you change the thrusters, and you get better thrusters, then your MOV can increase by 1, or your mana can increase by 1. That kind of thing, you know. There'll also be something in there to cope with differences between vehicle sizes. So that's not necessarily ship sizes. So an Eagle versus an Anaconda would still be on the same relative scale, but it would also mean that you could adjust how your hit-to-hit ratios would work for a ship trying to hit a car, for example. So a car being so much smaller than a ship, in some cases anyway, would mean that you would get up maybe a +1 bonus, or you could double the damage done against the shield or the hull of the ship. So that's the sort of stuff that we introduced in the intermediate rules. And in the advanced rules, even more elements added. This is where the bits like power allocation and heat management are added, which will, the way it's designed to work at the moment is you have a set amount of power points given by your engines, your power plant, and increased by the efficiency and rating of the power distribution system you have fitted, and that will give you a set amount of points that you can then distribute amongst all of your different equipment. If you don't put any power points onto that piece of equipment, then it ain't powered and it won't work, and you'll have to then divert power to that for any subsequent turns and so on. So for example, if you've been cruising around and you haven't allocated any power to your weapons, then you get attacked, then the first thing you would have to do in your first turn is make sure you've got power assigned to your weapon so you can actually attack someone. And again, heat management is the same kind of thing. So as you use everything, the heat builds up. This level of rules would involve you having to manage that heat and make sure that enough of that heat comes off between every round that you can actually manage not to overheat any of your weapons and not be able to fire. And it'll also introduce recharging and reloading. And at the moment I'm not entirely sure whether the recharging side of it is going to get put into the intermediate rules or the advanced rules. Part of me is thinking it should go into the intermediate rules because it would introduce one element of management rather than having all 3 different levels of management introduced into one set. So I may move the recharging and reloading side of things back into the intermediate rows. Okay, so that's that for the updates and the progress so far. As I say, all of the progress so far has been done on the ship combat rows. I have printed off for the first time a vehicle record file, which I have been scribbling on to make sure that everything works together. So we're going quite well on that. So, feedback and questions. Yeah, this is where things might get a little controversial. There's been a lot of negativity through the week about my supposed work schedule and how fast this project is going again. And once again, it's all the same people that are saying all the same things. So after the update last Monday, there were a few comments by a few people. They know who they are, who basically really got my back up, to be honest with you, because everything, the move to using video updates and the fact that I won't retract that point of view has been used again this week as a launch pad into saying why am I late, why won't you commit to a deadline, all the usual things that people are saying. Now, as I've said before, as I do understand the fact that yes, I have missed several deadlines and I will not commit to a deadline at the moment because of reasons. Through the week I did an extra update creating a frequently asked questions list, which regards and should answer all the questions that everyone keeps asking and everyone repeatedly keeps asking regarding deadlines and commitment and my work ethic. And it was fairly balls and all, it was I didn't pull many punches, although there was a fuller version than that one that did go into a lot more depth about what actually goes on. Now, essentially, to sum up for this update, real life happens. I have a real life. This Kickstarter was done as an additional project, and that's as far as it goes. As far as I'm concerned, what I do amongst that when I'm not working on the book is my business. There was also the big thing about the fact that on a Monday night after I've done this update, I go play a game. People are wondering, why do you go play games? How come you've got time to play games when you've got a book to write? This book is late. Well, and just to sum up, because that's the biggest issue I think that came out of that whole thing, and it was the most offensive issue, to be honest with you, is the fact that I have a life, I have a real life. I am not going to sit for 8 hours at work and then come home and sit for 8 hours in an office writing a book. I cannot do that every night. No one can do that every night. I refuse to do that every night because that will drive me into the fucking loony bin, to be quite honest with you. So the FAQ that I wrote regarding this is on the main website, the RPG website at Daftworks. So that's daftworks.co.uk/RPG, and it's currently linked on the front page. Otherwise, if you go to the blog list, it's listed on there, and it's called FAQ. It's also on the Kickstarter updates page, but that obviously can't be updated. So it's update 65, I think. That can't be updated if any other information comes in. So essentially, if you want to read the latest version, I will link people to the one on the website, which I will then change if anything else comes in, or any other questions get asked who should be answered there. But as regards questions regarding my work ethic, my work-life balance, the lateness of the project, and the reason why I play games every now and again, you can just assume I'm going to send you to that FAQ. I'm not going to spend hours writing responses to people who just can't be arsed reading or listening to anything that gets said or written on these on these updates. Not doing it anymore. So a lovely guy by the name of Sam Byford, who's been a loyal supporter and a very friendly supporter since the start of this project, has set up a Google community for the Elite Encounters role-playing game, which will obviously be used for updates and information as much as I can. Sam has volunteered to manage it for me, which is lovely of him. And then once the game's released, it will be used for announcements, updates, anything like that that may involve the project. So that's that. What else? That's in the next update. Is on the next thing. So the next update will be on the 29th of June, exactly a week from today. The other thing I would say at this point in time is that we are now a month away from, or less than a month from LaveCon. LaveCon 2015 is on the 11th and 12th of July, and I can't remember where it is now. Typical. But yes, I'll be there for both days touting the game, and I have a couple of volunteers who have volunteered to run the game for me as well. So good on them. Hopefully they'll follow through, and we'll see them at LaveCon. So I'll be free then to see some of the other stuff that's going on and maybe even play in a game rather than actually run one. That'll be an interesting thing. And be there to answer any other comments or questions by any of you guys that want to turn up, or by anyone who wants to know anything about the game. So that's that really. So I'll do the update the same way as I did last time. If you want to submit any comments to be included, or feedback, or anything you want to be said in the broadcast, then let me know, and I will include it if I can. I appreciate your time for listening, guys. This has been the third, I think, regular video update. I appreciate the time you spent watching it, and I'll see you next week.